You know, coming off of Eduardo's last, or one of his comments, that marketers are becoming technologists, I think that's a perfect segue into the next subject that we're going to cover today, which is that of technology and how its transformation is both affecting and informing our lives. And more pointed for today's conversation, how organizations are employing it in their marketing efforts and customer engagement programs. An article by Steve Lord that appeared earlier this month in the New York Times, I think, captures the transformation we're now seeing. He remarked that technology tends to cascade in the marketplace in waves. Think of the personal computers of the 80s, the internet of the 90s, and smartphones of just the last 5 years. He suggests that computing may be on the cusp of another such wave, one where smarter machines and software will help people make better business decisions. Going along with this thought, today's panel will focus on how companies are leveraging technology and getting their arms around big data to make better marketing decisions. The panel will be moderated by Katherine White, who brings 20 years of international sales and marketing experience to her current position as Vice President of Marketing for IBM's Global Business Services. Katherine is a member of IBM's Global Senior Leadership Team, and in that role has met with over 400 CMOs, that's right, 400 CMOs, and completed more than 20 customized individual CMO workshops in the last year alone. I would say you've been pretty busy. Well, I'm glad you could make it. Joining Katherine on today's panel will be Roberto Maciero, Vice President at ADP's Innovation Labs, Tim Souther, Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Axion, and Sandra Zarati, Vice President of Marketing, Executive Briefings and Education at Ricoh. Sandra is also the author of the book Precision Marketing. Please join me in welcoming the technology panel.
Okay, while we're coming up, if we could start the video, that would be great. Okay, chief executive customer. Well, that really does change, I think, my mentality, thinking about my role and the transformation that's occurring to our profession. I will try to do a couple of things. One, I'll try to make an argument of why I think this transformation is happening to us externally and how prepared we are for it and whether we have the mandate as I guess, criteria for how fast a transformation occurs. I'll try to limit PowerPoint, which is always challenging, a little bit of that, and then ask some questions to the panel. So I'll try to do all that very quickly so the panel doesn't get bored with me and give you a chance to ask some questions as well. So let's see. We're back to the charts. Yeah. So the first thing I think as part of the transformation, so obviously from the video I believe that it's being driven externally. But what we were, in preparing for this panel, we wanted to take a look at some research we had done within IBM around the CMO and the CEO, with sort of C-suite studies we do, which are in-person studies. If you have not looked at the CMO study, I would suggest you take a look at it, because I think it does support a lot of the comments that Eduardo made. We talked to over 1,700 CMOs in person and found that there were 4 things that we believe are most important to our profession and that we're the least prepared for. So a real signal of transformation from my standpoint. Those 4 are simply data explosion, social media, growth of channel and device choices, and shifting consumer demographics. And when you look at all different kind of industries, different countries, these 4 keep coming up the same. So the first thing I would contend is that we're underprepared. So the shift is external. We as a profession are underprepared. And then I guess the third element of it, we do a similar study from the CEO standpoint. Coincidentally, it happened to be about the same amount of respondents or interviews for this time around, 1,700. And there were 3 things that came out of that study, and one was specifically around understanding the customer. And specifically that those companies that understood the customer as an individual are outperforming their peers. They're doing it in terms of having better data access, insight, and being able to translate that into actionability for their organization, so affecting behavior change. So again, here's my premise. It's happening external to us. We're underprepared, and yet we have the mandate. So for me, all of those things point to a period of transformation for our companies, I think, as Eduardo has effectively laid out for us. But from an IBM standpoint, we also believed, hey, we need to have a point of view on this. I mean, we can't just say all this is happening, but we need to have a point of view on the direction that it's going and how we would get there. So in terms of the last setup, there's 3 imperatives that we think are driving this change. The first is that we believe each of us organizationally need to understand our customer as an individual. I would contend that our expectations are not based on our best experience in an industry, but our best experience. And so we come with those expectations into the B2B world as well. To be able to understand the customer as an individual, it is about big data. It's certainly about technology. But I think it's much more than that. It's how we use the data. I will argue that we have to set up new data partnerships. Partners in the old were more about channels. Eduardo's always effectively argued that it's more about access now. But what data do we have and what data do we need? How will we blend that internal and external data, the structured and unstructured, the real time, the ability to listen to really impact change, to better understand that individual? Because when we can, I will argue, that then we have the opportunity to create this system of engagement, where every touch we have with our customer, our potential customer, creates more value than the previous touch, is that much more informed than the previous touch, has that much better analytics and insight to be able to maximize the value that we create, such that marketing is so good it feels like a service. Now, I'll argue that the very technology that makes the first 2 imperatives true is actually the risk in the third, meaning that the transparency and the environment in which we all operate requires those touches to be so authentic. And I think the Motorola example showed us how important this was, but that we have to design our culture and brand so they're authentically one, so that we can move from loyalty to advocacy. We have to first engage our employees to then be able to connect with our ecosystem, to then have a chance at connecting with our customers to drive that advocacy. So I really think it's the combination of these 3 things. You might argue the first imperative is a little more a CMO-CIO partnership. The second imperative is a little more of a CMO sales business leader partnership. And the third imperative is a little more of an HR partnership, as Eduardo walked through. But I really think it's about how together we will change the enterprise. And so with that, let me turn to my panel and offer some questions and see if we can dive a little bit more into where we're going. I think it's obvious to be able to deal with these trends. Roberto, let's hear first from a technology perspective, that we have to address technology. But, you know, you guys have different language and different governance. I mean, how do we work together to be able to address these changes?
I think that's a great question. I think, you know, I'll speak a lot about ADP, the payroll company, right, as you guys know. I mean, we have a great platform in terms of, you know, we interact with our clients on a weekly basis. 1 in every 6 employees in the United States is paid by ADP. So we have this chance of touching their lives every week or every other week. And I think what we did is, it's funny because we started with pure technical necessity of making the experience of the user coming to use our systems more engaging, right? So nothing to do with marketing, but hey, we need to cache things so that when the user comes to use our systems, everything is ready, it's in memory, it's pushed to their device or whatever media they have. And to do that, we had to capture the information, the behavior of our clients, our customers, to understand that, okay, John Doe will come and look at his paycheck Thursday morning at around 9 o'clock in the morning, right? So we better push that paycheck to him as soon as possible, right? 8:30, it better be in his device even before he asks for it. So we started putting all this data on this huge big data repository and start running some map-reduced reports and getting all that behavior intelligence. And it was great when we presented that, for example, to our product management and to our marketing people, and they said, this is awesome, right? Because now I have all this knowledge about this our customer, down to the detail of, you know, where they are. I mean, there's a lot of sensors on these devices, right? So you can really target the message, right? And use the behavior, the empiric behavior of the customer to better drive the message, to better engage, to better serve our community of clients.
So a common purpose will help us come together as marketing and technology to drive this change.
Yeah.
Good. Sandra, I know you've talked with a lot of different organizations in writing your book, but also you have personal experience in terms of this journey and what you've learned along the way. Maybe you could share with us some of the things you've learned.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So good afternoon. I think today it's really challenging. The last 2 years have been difficult as marketers. Let's just come out and say that. But it's also very exciting. And I look at what's going on with customer engagement on the B2C side, and I believe that we have something to learn from the B2C folks on our side, the B2B. And I look at companies like Starbucks and American Express who are designing their brand and culture by having the conversations with customers, that they actually help design the products and the brand, because those companies are creating ecosystems that involve partners and their customers. And like Best Buy, they say our new model is like a hive because they have all of their employees interacting with their customers to help solve problems. I think it's called 12 Force. So what we've done is we said, okay, let's learn from that. And we are now, in my business, creating ecosystems that are small, high-touch events that we build up to by using social conversations and external data, analyzing that data, and then touching those customers by hosting events where we can actually have a conversation and ask them to help design what we're providing as solutions. And the one that I'm most proud of was in the utility industry, an unlikely industry for customer engagement because they have captive customers. But we did this with a 6-month lead up, used all the channels we could, took a content marketing approach, used data analytics, and for an investment of less than about $100,000, we touched $14 million of revenue. So I was astounded because of what we were able to do and learn and take that step of the journey to really move forward and start practicing some of these things that are a little bit overwhelming and challenging and learning from that.
That's very good insight. I mean, it seems like you've seen some good examples of best practice, but as I've gone and talked to these 400 or so CMOs, there are not as many phenomenal examples. I mean, perhaps we're just not as far progressed on these imperatives or dealing with these changes as we might hope as a profession. Tim, do you have any thoughts on why that is and how we might be able to accelerate this change?
Yeah, I do. Let me take a step back, though. I mean, we're here at a conference talking about transformation, and as I was flying in this morning, thinking about that, I was wondering, well, what was the most significant transformation facing marketers today? And I think it's the shift in power from brands to customers, and that's fueled by just this enormous availability of information. I mean, think about it for a moment. Your product, its price, its availability, satisfaction, what people say about it, is freely available. And that has just changed the dimension in terms of the relationship between brands and customers. And I think that's true for business-to-business marketing as well as business to consumers. So, and the effects of that have been, frankly, kind of devastating. I mean, if you think about all major brand metrics are in decline. Just 25% of consumers say they're loyal to brands. Another 25% say they express no loyalty at all. And this is in an era where we can reach out and touch consumers in more ways than we ever could before. So why is that? And meanwhile, we live in this era, as we've all talked about, this era of big data. And to say that big data drives value is not a statement of the blindingly obvious. I mean, there are 5 of the 10 most valuable companies in the world have data as a central premise in the way that they drive value. It's just that the value is unevenly distributed, and I would say that brands have yet to really tap into the full potential. So, to your question, why is that? Why aren't people further along with this? And I think it has to do with alignment. And in my experience, oftentimes organizations get caught up into the rapture of customer love, right? Of course we love our customers. Customers are the center of all that we do, but you'll find that it isn't always consistent with the way that the organization makes money. There's lots of ways that you can make money other than loving your customers. And I know that sounds odd for a marketer to say that. You can always have the cheapest price. You can be everywhere. You can have the best mousetrap. And I think organizations often run into trouble when they're not authentic with the way that they set out to make money. So, that's where I would look first, is just being true to the company's strategy, making sure that the way that you go to market is in fact consistent with that.
Yeah, that alignment is definitely an accelerator. I mean, when I go to conferences like this, I like to think that there's 1 or 2 pragmatic things that I can do coming out of the conference. So I'll ask each of the panels to give their thoughts on how do you get started in this space. What are the 1 or 2 things you'd recommend for the folks to get their pens out to take notes or whatever that coming back from this conference could really help them accelerate this journey. Sandra, you want to start?
Sure. So I think one of the big challenges is the amount of data, and data isn't helpful unless you extract the insights. The stat I love from Social Skinny is we get about 300 billion Twitter updates, 500 million Facebook updates. I mean, it's overwhelming to consumers. So what I say is let go of the fear and start. Start with a small piece of your data that you can control and understand. Drag out the insights from that data by using partners, and then create a side-by-side test where you can measure the impact of using analytics to drive customer engagement versus not. So my number one piece of advice is to get started and overcome the fear, because it is overwhelming, but a small step is the first thing you need to take.
We did some research that may be counterintuitive on this point, where we said actually it's good to start small, but it's also important to start with a very meaningful business issue, because top talent will come to that pilot or to that project. So sometimes you might think of starting with something that's less important. Don't. Start with the thing that's most important.
Like your high-value customers is a great starting point,
Yeah,
right? A subset of that. Thanks.
Okay, Roberto, how about on your side? Where to start?
I think the big data, understanding how you collect that and how you create value from that. I think one of the things that we did, as we said, is just partnership between the IT and marketing is crucial. So if you're not having your weekly meetings, between the two departments and making them work together. I know that IT, and I come from there, sometimes it's hard, right? I mean, we all, have our releases and production issues and, implementation and service. One of the things that we did at ADP is we've segregated, similar to Motorola, we segregated a number of people, which is, again, the innovation lab is that, right? That is outside of that cycle of releases, of just taking care of the products as we have them today, and trying to think a little bit outside of the box, right? So we put these agents on every product that collect the information, we aggregate them, and we make them into intelligence, right, for the marketing department, for the product design department. And I think that is an easy, let's say, first step, right? It's not that expensive, right, to segregate people that understand the ecosystem, but at the same time understand how to create value out of every touch, every experience we have with the client.
That's very good. I mean, I have been surprised at how many organizations I've talked to where they really haven't thought about what the monetization of the data that they have, how to monetize it or what it's worth today. And then more importantly, what their data strategy is versus what they have versus what they need. And so the idea of coming together between marketing technology around that data value strategy or information agenda, some people call it, I think is a really pragmatic place to start. Okay, Tim, how about on your side?
I was just going to riff on your comment there. It's sometimes even worse than not even recognizing the value. Many organizations consciously give it away. So in the media buys that they do, I can tell you it's common practice for the media trading desk to assert ownership rights to brand data. When you have an aggressive strategy in the social networks, data goes in, hard to get the data out. This at the same time when we've just said that data is this enormous economic engine. So I think it's a little stronger than that. But for me, I spend a lot of time with different organizations as well, and I always get the question, what's the most valuable data, right? Is it what people search for? Is it their friends? Is it what they buy? Is it what they say they're going to buy? Is it the digital sites they track on the net? And the sad truth is no one single source is going to give you the silver bullet. So the key is to look for connections. So where you have your CRM database, try pointing it to your website or pointing it into the television buying process. If you've found something interesting in social media that appears to be suspiciously like a persona that your agency of record has designed for you, well, connect that signal so that you can adjust what you're doing with traditional media. So a lot of low-hanging fruit just simply by connecting things together.
That's very helpful. I do think the connection is a powerful opportunity for us. I'm a little confused on the timing. Can somebody help me with how much time we have?
13, 28, 27.
Well, let me give you my big data insight, and that is, it's not the data, it's not the technology. 20 minutes. Thank you. It's what is the question. And I think the flip side of what Tim was getting to when he's being asked, what's the most important data, is what's the most important question. And oftentimes I'm visiting organizations, they can't answer that, so I turn the question around and I say, what's the question that if your competitor had the answer first, you would be most worried about? And that question they more likely can answer. So you might try that in terms of how your data strategy evolves as well.
I like, a lot of, there was comments on this earlier, a lot of organizations are judging success by how well a particular campaign performs or how well a channel or a piece of media performs. And I think in this world of unlimited choice and information, you're going to increasingly find the answer to your question that you want answered, which is, what are the most valuable relationships, right? What are the most, how do I impact the profitability of my customer portfolio? And to answer that question, you cannot be thinking simply about the success of your display advertising campaign or the performance of your branded television. It's about customers. It's not about digital. It's not about offline. It's about customers.
Very good. Let's see if we can take some questions from the audience for the panel. Please.
Hi, one of the panelists commented, I think it was you, Tim, about the change in power dynamics, that people have so much more power than they used to have. My question is, of the whole panel, what example of a brand or a company can you think of where they've come to terms with that shift and reorganized their culture and brand in an authentic way to turn that into an advantage, the loss of power? They've reacted to it in a creative way and turned it into an advantage.
Well, there's a lot of famous examples that are digital companies. You got to love what Amazon and Zappos are doing. But I would say they frankly have it easy. I mean, they have generally a single channel to deal with. If you want like the Olympic diving with super difficulty, I think about what Macy's is trying to do. Imagine the transformation that that company has to go through with stores everywhere, the result of a lot of different acquisitions, all kinds of different channels. And their strategy starts right at the top. There is no CEO at Macy's. It doesn't exist. Terry Lundgren, the guy who runs the place, is the chief customer officer. That's literally what's on the title outside his office. I've seen it. And that has a really galvanizing effect to the way that that organization thinks. The customer truly is the center of all that organization does. Now, they've got this enormous transformation. They're in the middle of the journey, and it's far from perfect. But I like that because it's a really difficult problem to solve. It's a multi-channel type of problem. And maybe you guys have some of those.
Yeah, I think this flip from, not a flip, because I think they're complementary to each other, from the B2B to the B2C, right? And understanding the social impact of that. So we see that as a three separate social aspects that we need to monitor and act upon, right? One is your brand, and how do you monitor the social networks to see if your brand is resonating there and have a good reputation. Second one is using social as part of your service, right? So create the communities, and that creates engagement, that creates, makes every client a marketing channel per se. And the third one is to embed social in every process that you do, right? So we're doing things like, obviously social during your recruitment, social during your outplacement, right? Your 360. So all of the products that we sell, right? The processes that we are, one of the conduits for in the HR or HCM space, trying to embed that social, because that creates such a connection between the consumer and the product that they're using. And if you monitor those three, they weave together the whole story of your brand, right? From recognizing from the logo all the way to that daily experience with your product. And I think that's a very powerful thing. I think it's the best time to be on the marketing space, because I was talking to Tim that I think before marketing was almost like a means to an end, right? I need to sell this product, so let me use marketing. Now marketing is the product. Right, the way I see it, right? I mean, you see so many companies there that the sole revenue is marketing, right? So I think it's a phenomenal time to be, and I'm happy to be a partner of marketing on that.
So do you remember that FedEx last Christmas where the delivery guy was throwing the computer monitor over the fence? The customer video for that disaster got 9 million, almost 9 million YouTube views. The apology, which was lovely, 24 hours later, got like 500,000 views.
Naturally.
The customer is God. And I think the best examples of companies is when they open up to vulnerability. And I mentioned quickly earlier, looking at Best Buy to say, we're going to let all our employees interact with all our customers. That's a huge cultural shift that so many of us are fearful or not ready to take. Or thinking about American Express, that not only opened up the employees, but also said to their customers, give us all this input, we'll let the subject matter experts then call through and tell you how we're going to act on it. I think about IBM, who I used to be with, and I think it was called World Jam. They opened up online to input from employees around the world. Companies that then can do that and open it up to customers around the world, to me are saying, I recognize the balance of power has shifted. I am not in control. The customer is in control. Let me jump in, swim in it, and leverage it and capture what I can and let that customer be in the driver's seat, because you're not going to change that. So that's my little 2 cents on it. It's a great question. Thank you.
The one thing I'd add is I think the commonality of the success stories is around how the employees have been engaged in it. So even though the question is more oriented around the shift in power to the customer, the continuity, the cultural elements, as Eduardo walked through, for us it was, when we sold the PC business in IBM, people thought the brand value would deteriorate. But the Smarter Planet effort was about employee engagement, not anything more than that, but it became much more.
Becoming helpful.
Please.
We would also agree that in order to be successful in these ever-changing times, that the traditional department silos need to be broken down. Everyone needs to be working together. Do you guys then see a change in the traditional hiring process in order to fill these roles that kind of sway across different departments?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now as a marketer, you're absolutely right. First of all, the technologist is my best friend. And I think that we need new skills in marketing that are maybe hybrid roles of technology plus marketing. You hear about chief customer experience officer or content marketing officer or people who have expertise in these areas. Eduardo, you mentioned analytics and how do we do really the customer engagement. So skills and capabilities in those areas are difficult to find and absolutely critical to have. So I think that's how it's really changed. And then add on to that, the social media and getting talent that really understands how to jump in and leverage that.
I think the one thing, in addition to all that, I agree with, that is going to be important going forward that we don't have a lot of today in marketing are systems thinkers. The ability to connect all these things for real impact is going to distinguish leaders in the future.
And data scientists. I mean, our marketing department started hiring them because, to understand this vast amount of data that we're creating, you need people that are really, the PhDs that know how to decipher all that and make it into strategy.
Isn't that cool? Just a few years ago, people got into marketing because they heard there'd be no math, and now we have data scientists.
Good point.
My dad was a math teacher and my mom kindergarten. I think that's all you really need in marketing. Another question.
Full of questions today. You had talked earlier about the so treating the customers as individuals, having the insight to do so, and then creating systems of engagement around that. Can you talk a little bit about how IBM goes about doing that with its customers and other folks on the panel too, how your companies go about approaching that? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, we are definitely in a journey of on all dimensions of the imperatives. But the way we approached it is we first got the employee engagement or the brand and culture sort of foundation built, a bit like the Motorola example. And we have worked through our integrating all of our data for a single view of the customer, and we're continuing to refine that and building through this system of engagement through marketing automation, but being able to get a lens on that from the seller standpoint in the same way that we're able to have that lens from a marketing standpoint, so bringing together the different strategic objectives around it. So we've had phenomenal business results in terms of being able to implement these things. On the other hand, we think we have a long way to go to really realize the true opportunity that's there.
And small actions, right? I mean, simple things that if you sprinkle across your offering, I think you do make, I mean, one example is, which is funny because it's such a small thing, but people were really like, oh, this is awesome. Like people punch, right? Simple thing, right? This is workers across the United States that punch in and punch out every morning and then when they go to lunch and all that, right? And sometimes they forget. Well, we tell them now. We know their schedule and we send a message, a conversation, an informal, almost like we're talking to you, right? To say, hey, didn't you forget to clock in this morning? Right? Like 5 minutes after his shift started. And people just like absolutely love it, right?
It's good.
Small little thing, right? That really creates this engagement, this personal relationship, right? This between the the company, the consumer, and the employer. So.
What we've tried to do is to be less of a broadcaster and be more of a facilitator and an educator. So for example, we've taken a vertical approach, and within an industry, we will bring together people who can interact and learn from each other. We're sort of the hub or the facilitator of letting that conversation occur. And then we develop offerings like an analytics suite around an industry where those players all would share their data. We could take that collective offering and give something back to all of those industry players that would be very relevant and very useful. But creating that venue for the conversation is really letting them engage, and then we're part of that.
Yeah, you talked. Yeah, I'll be quick. You talked a lot about assembling a single view of the customer. I'm more fascinated about what you can do once you have that platform. I like two things. One is having a customer value-driven approach, and I mean that in both directions. I mean the value that can be generated to customers, as well as the value that can be generated back to you. And that's a lot different than the way a lot of marketing is measured. A lot of marketing is measured, by conversions. Never mind the fact that one conversion could be worth 10 times what another is worth. So the idea of having customer value as a driving metric for marketing programs is a really big deal. And I would say the second thing is once you have assembled all this, great insight, it always amuses me how a big brand can spend a couple $100 million cultivating insight. They have transactional data, they have loyalty, they might have registration systems, they have response behavior, their agency of record is create all these wonderful personas, they have primary research, and when it comes time to run most of their advertising, they use none of it. And the idea to be able to take that and to use it more profoundly in the media buying process is also a very, very big breakthrough.
And there is really opportunity across each of these imperatives, and I think connecting the imperatives for each of us to lead for our organization. And I do think that's the critical element of this is that the change is happening externally. The transformation in terms of being underprepared and having the mandate is truly ours. And the opportunity to collaborate across the C-suite for this impact could not be greater, and in fact is quite necessary to achieve the challenges that we have ahead of us. I hope you'll join me in thanking the panel for their comments, and we hope you got something from this session.
Thanks, Katherine.